The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is probably the most visited national park in the United States. Located in Appalachia along the Tennessee and North Carolina border, visitors to the park experience as close as possible the ecosystem that existed in the area when the first settlers came through. Deep in the woods there, you'd think nobody had ever set foot in the Smokies. You'd be wrong. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilly, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, A History of Appalachia. Now, before we get started with this story, I'd like to ask you to go down below and click that subscribe button and to ding that bell to get notifications of all our latest stories. And while you're there, be sure to give us a thumbs up if you don't mind.
Steve, when we talk about the Great Smoky Mountains and the Smoky Mountains National Park, it's just a treasure. It's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And, you see why, they were so keen on getting that named as a national park because it's just beautiful there. I mean, it's just like time stood still, especially for the Appalachians.
It does look that way, although it was a pretty heavily populated area at one time. The Park Service has done a good job at reclaiming the forest and bringing the wildlife back into the area and making it into one of the best parks in the country, if not one of the most crowded, to be honest with you.
Well, and I guess the other thing too, Steve, we got to remember, bears are probably the trademark of the Great Smoky Mountains. That's what everybody thinks of. And I know here in recent years, it's been a battle trying to keep humans from contaminating, so to speak, these bears and taking them out of their natural environment because they're becoming dependent on, human beings to eat. But, that's another story for another day, though.
The Great Smoky Mountains National Park was established on June 13th, 1934, from land purchased piece by piece from folks who lived in that area. Now, prior to 1934, the Smokies were like any other part of Appalachia with farms, towns, mines, and logging operations. And logging figures into our story today. You see, the Little River Railroad was built in the late 19th century to haul timber out of the mountains, which was usually harvested by clear cutting, one of the main reasons why the park was established to begin with. The Little River Railroad Company owned a number of tracts of logging land near the town of Wallen, Tennessee. The company built a railroad from there to a company town they built named Elkmont, from where timber was harvested. As the trees were depleted, the Little River Railroad began promoting the idea that the Elkmont area was excellent for hunting and fishing. So they connected a branch from their railroad to the Southern Railway, which then linked Elkmont to the world. And there were plenty of folks who were willing to book passage from Knoxville on the Little River Railroad for a 2-hour train trip to do some of that hunting and fishing.
In order to accommodate all of those tourists, Little River Railroad Company President Colonel W.B. Townsend gave Charles B. Carter 50 acres of cut-over land on which to build a fine hotel. Carter formed a company to do just that, the Wonderland Club Company, and built that hotel, the Wonderland Hotel, which opened on June 11th, 1912. The Wonderland was exactly that, a wonderland. It was a 2-story wood frame building built from local trees, including American chestnut trees harvested nearby. The steps to the hotel started at the Little River Railroad and then went up to the top of the hill upon which the Wonderland Hotel sat. River rocks were cemented onto the tops of those stairs that spelled out Wonderland, and these steps are still there just to the left of the Elkmont campground entrance.
The hotel had 26 sleeping rooms, all designed to be unique. And it had a large wraparound porch that allowed a magnificent view of nearby Blanket Mountain. The lobby had a huge brick double-faced fireplace around which guests would sit in chairs and couches to keep warm and read or write postcards home. And it had a world-class dining room with its own fireplace, famous for the excellent food served to the guests there. They also served game, which was brought in by the guests themselves from their hunts, including deer, rabbit, wild turkey, bear, ruffed grouse, and Rod, even rattlesnake.
They say it tastes like chicken, though.
I have no idea, and I'm never going to find out.
I haven't either, but I've just heard a lot of people say it tastes like chicken. So,
well, they also had fresh fish. I think I'd rather have that instead. And the
Yes.
fish was caught from the little river itself, and it was often on the menu. Well, over the next few years, there were so many visitors to this fine hotel that the wealthy decided they wanted their own, more exclusive digs, so they established the Appalachian Club. The club bought land from the Little River Railroad Company between Gatlinburg and Cades Cove, on which their families built cabins and a clubhouse. And each summer, these folks would take the Little River Railroad from Knoxville and beyond to enjoy the benefits of the Appalachian Club. And this club was so popular that they started turning away potential members. In 1919, a group of those rejects got together and formed their own association, which bought the Wonderland Hotel and the building surrounding it. And when they did that, they closed the hotel to the general public, reserving it solely for their own use.
Mm, sad. But as with all of these wealthy folks experienced the Smokies, they became concerned about all that logging and the possibility of development there in the wilderness. So they decided to do something about it. The Appalachian Club and the Wonderland Club got together and formed the Great Smoky Mountains Conservation Association in 1923. That association was the initial force behind the formation of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. On May 22nd, 1926, President Calvin Coolidge, old Silent Cal, he signed into law a bill committing the federal government to develop and administer such a national park. Once Tennessee and North Carolina donated a minimum of 423,000 acres in the mountains. Well, once the Little River Railroad Company had finished logging all the timber they could log in that area, they shut down the railroad and secretly moved the rail line in late 1925. The Appalachian Club and the Wonderland Club took over the old rail bed and built a road along that bed, which is now Tennessee Route 73 from Townsend to Elkmont.
And speaking of Elkmont, the clubs managed to convince Congress to let them keep a 50-year lease around the town and the Wonderland Hotel in exchange for $1 a year. And in exchange for that dollar, the National Park Service was to provide a water system, sewer, road upkeep, and police and fire coverage. Quite a sweet deal. Well, in 1952, the members of the Appalachian Club traded in their lifetime lease for a 20-year renewable lease. At renewal time in 1972, the Wonderland Club joined the Appalachian Club to form a new entity, the Elkmont Preservation Association, which got a new 20-year lease and the right to continue to operate the Wonderland Hotel or to lease its operation to a third party. In 1992, the lease expired, and so did the Wonderland. On November 15th of that year, the hotel closed its doors, and 3 years later, a fire occurred at the Wonderland, partially destroying it. Well, the National Park Service had originally planned to tear down and remove the Wonderland Hotel and the buildings remaining in Elkmont under the service's General Management Plan of 1982, which mandated the removal of structures in the park to allow nature to reclaim the land. Before that could happen, though, Elkmont and the Wonderland Hotel were placed on the National Register of Historic Places as the, quote, Elkmont Historic District, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, thus saving the remaining buildings.
Well, 10 years passed. Elkmont and what was left of the Wonderland was slowly being swallowed up by the Appalachian Forest, and the National Park Service was concerned about the safety of hikers and day visitors to Elmont and what was left of the Wonderland Hotel. So they awarded a $65,000 contract to Moran Construction of Abingdon, Virginia, to dismantle the remains of the hotel. Those items that could be salvaged or, whatever they could find could be put together and kind of gathered for historical preservation. And if they were carefully removed, then the rest of the Wonderland was demolished, all but an annex that had been built back in the hotel's heyday and which had been untouched by the 1995 fire. As luck would have it, though, the annex was later destroyed in a mysterious fire in May of 2016.
The entire Elkmont area, including the site of the Wonderland Hotel, was placed on the 11 most endangered places list by the National Trust for Historic Preservation in 2006. Now, the structures slated to be saved are located in what was once called Daisy Town, which was a part of the Appalachian Club section. They're the oldest, and they're deemed the most historic. And one of the restoration projects will be the Appalachian Club's clubhouse. Now, after burning down in a fire in 1932, it was rebuilt in 1934. Another of the structures to be saved is the Levi Trentham Cabin, Elkmont's oldest surviving cabin, built in 1830. It was originally located at the upper part of Jakes Creek, but was moved to the Daisy Town section in 1932 by those rich folks for use as a guest house. And a couple of the other things that are supposed to be saved are the Addicts Cabin and the Mayo Cabin.
You know, Steve, this amazes me because we're talking probably business people, people who had a vested interest in making money back in the 20s, the teens and the 20s, and they saw fit to go and try to protect this land from being developed and turned into, so to speak, you know, for logging and other things like that. They saw fit to do that. That's kind of unheard of in today's time, it seems like, with the way that business is and the way that everybody wants to hold on to money and so forth.
Well, these folks, I guess, were much more progressive than the
Hmm.
other rich folks of the time, and thank goodness they were. You know, you can still go up there and take a look at the ruins of the Wonderland Hotel, although it's mainly just a fireplace and some steps going up from the road down below. But some of the other houses are still there in various states of repair or disrepair. So if you get a chance, why not turn and check it out. And folks, that's the story of Elkmont and the Wonderland Hotel, another part of the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for listening. The Stories podcast, the audio version, is available on your favorite podcast app. Be sure to subscribe. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Till next time, I'll take care. So long, everybody.
So long.